He is Director of Cairns Marine Australia since 1994, one of EUAC sponsors. He's President of Provision Reef. This is an association of collectors promoting sustainable reef use since 2007. He spent all his life in aquarium or on the reef. Professional diver and with a free diving background. He listens to a lot of hard rock and he almost became an architect. Please welcome Mr. L V Squire.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you very much. As Stefan mentioned, I'm the President of Provision Reef, the association representing the aquarium, fish and coral collectors in Australia and in Queensland. And it's really wearing that hat that I'll be talking to you today about aquarium fisheries on the Great Barrier Reef, stewardship in action. So we've certainly come a long way since the ancient Sumerians were keeping ornamental fish in ponds 4,500 years ago. Indeed, today, amazing coral reef systems and large open ocean tanks displaying incredible creatures like this silver-tip shark up there. These have really become the norm today. In fact, today's marine aquarium industry globally is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But as we've heard from a number of talks today, and there was no conspiring involved in having a similar theme between those, but you know, as we've seen, this demand has created a proliferation of fisheries around the world that are often having no management whatsoever and quite often practicing destructive forms of reef harvest. Now, it seems that a lot of people in zoos and aquariums don't always pause to think about the fact that the fish that they are displaying have actually come from a definable fishery. Now, if we start to drill down into those fisheries in the Pacific, there's really 4 types of environmental regulatory environments. Now, these range from the free-for-all fisheries of Indonesia, with little to no management at all, with the exception of cyanide being illegal, all the way through to the comprehensively managed coral reef fisheries of Australia that I'm proud to participate in. So, it's noteworthy that 70 to 80% of the fish that are imported into the United States each year are derived from Indonesia and the Philippines, the places with the least amount of management. Now, this is a consistent statistic around the globe. And the reason for that is purely and solely around cost. These are the cheapest fish that you can possibly get on the market, and quite often these afford higher margins for the on-sellers. So clearly not all fisheries are equal, and it begs the question, you know, what fishery are you and your institution choosing to support? However, I'm not here to focus on the negatives in industry today. I'm here to give you a good news story, which will be pleasant after seeing some of the slides in the previous discussions. I'm here to tell you today about a clear-cut example of world's best practice, and that is the Queensland aquarium and coral fishery. And this is a co-managed fishery that has been voluntarily going above and beyond community expectation for some time. It's a sustainable fishery with a sound provenance model. It's got an impeccable environmental credentials, and for several years now we've been demonstrating an unprecedented degree of stewardship. But I'd like to give you a little bit of spatial context. So if we look up here, we've got this inset is depicting the state of Queensland on Australia. So here's Queensland, and this green area running down the side of Queensland is in fact the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park is a World Heritage listed area. Australians are fiercely protective over their Great Barrier Reef, so as you could expect, there's a high degree of scrutiny from the community. And the Great Barrier Reef is comprised of over 2,900 individual reefs. It's an enormous area covering 500,000 square kilometres. And to put that into context, the UK is around 240,000 square kilometres, so you could fit the entire United Kingdom twice over into the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. Adjoining the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park is this area out here, and this is the coral sea fishery. Now, the coral sea fishery covers a massive 1 million square kilometres. So between these areas, 1.5 million square kilometres, the entirety of the European Union is around 4 million square kilometres. So it's a little bit less than half the size of the entirety of the European Union. Operating in this area here is a maximum of 30 licensees. Of those 30 licensees, only 2 of them have permission to be able to operate out in the Coral Sea. So there's only 30 licensees operating in an area of 1.5 million square kilometres, so an incredibly low footprint. And of those licensees, you're only allowed 3 divers per aquarium fish licence. So it's an input managed fishery. Looking at the profile of the industry a little bit closer, the businesses involved in it vary substantially in scale from small husband and wife teams. They're typically family orientated operations, and this has a significant impact on the ability to generate an impetus for stewardship, I believe. So the operations range from large, highly capitalised ones, as depicted on the top, with large onshore facilities and large collection vessels. But the key distinguishing feature that sort of makes the Queensland fishery unique around the world is this high degree of vertical integration. And this is ensuring that operators are retaining the custody from that point of capture right through the entire process, right up until the export point. And the only real other examples of that is like Dynasty Marine and Flying Sharks. However, it hasn't been a rosy history for our fishery. In fact, we've spent over the last decade fighting for our survival and justifying our existence. This all really started in around 2001 when our then Environment Minister decided in a knee-jerk reaction after he was embarrassed at a symposium to close our coral fishery. It took us 4 years of pain and suffering to overturn that decision, and at the end of it there was a newfound coral policy, and it was demonstrated that that was probably the most sustainable fishery we had on the Great Barrier Reef, with the coral fishery only harvesting around 0.0001% of the annual regrowth of coral on the Great Barrier Reef per year. We then went straight from the fight to maintain the coral fishery into the marine protected areas with the implementation of the Representative Areas Program, which was a rezoning of the entirety of the Great Barrier Reef. Through that process, our company, Cairns Marine, lost over 80% of some of our traditional fishing grounds. So that had an enormous impact on our operation. Added on to that, over the past few years, there's been a number of CITES-based issues surrounding corals, the humphead Napoleons, or Maori wrasse, as we call them in Australia, of which I'm also very thankful to say that we've got extremely healthy populations of. And there are protected species there. A number of shark species, of which you'll be familiar with, and I'm sure a lot of you would be well aware of our efforts trying to maintain access to sawfish for public aquaria. Coupling all of that, we've had to face a number of politicians that have been bent on carving their own personal legacies and making their impact without really having comprehension or understanding of our fisheries. And this has made things very difficult when you're facing political decisions rather than things based on sustainability. However, the one thing I can say is that from adversity comes strength, and it also provides drive. And this has been a process that has helped industry to unify and come together. So in 2007, Provision Reef was determined to bulletproof industry to help reduce our vulnerability to some of these external pressures. operators and around the state could see that if we continued on the same trajectory and we did nothing and kept our heads in the sand, that we would likely not survive. We needed to be proactive and we needed to put our environmental credentials on the table for all to see. So in 2009, we set about developing a code of practice, and this evolved into something far more, and it really became something quite special. Initially, it started off just detailing the usual set of standards that the community and market would expect, and we developed all this in conjunction with our protected area managers and our fishery managers. The big thing about the Stewardship Action Plan was, though, that we really started to try and grapple with the looking at the potential impacts from climate change. How was our fishery going to deal with this? How were we going to respond to coral bleaching, storm damage, coastal flooding, all these things that we are told are going to increase in frequency with climate change? So we set about trying to document not only our plans as to how we would work with this, but come up with innovative strategies to be able to deal with it. So we looked at cessation of collection in certain areas if it was impacted to us, depending on the degree of impact. Key functional groups. We wouldn't take certain species of fish in order to allow areas to recover. Whole gambit of activities there. And so this was what we believe to be a world first with a voluntary plan from industry. Now this was a great success. Our fisheries managers really appreciated the work that we were doing, and it assisted us greatly through that development of management arrangements. And the fisheries managers liked it because we were doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And we've got a small crowd of people here that were gathered to get their first copy of the Stewardship Action Plan as it came off the press. However, as we know in this dynamic world, if you're not moving forward, then you're going backwards. So no sooner had we produced that first document than we could see we really could improve on certain aspects, and there was a number of areas that needed to be further expanded. So we were particularly interested in looking at the integrative approach to management and develop a viable co-management model. Now, a lot of people talk about co-management in fisheries, but quite often managers and even industry alike don't really have good comprehension of what that looks like and how it actually works. So it was that process that we really wanted to grab onto and run with and see if we could come up with an answer to it. Now, over a decade ago, the Australian federal government passed a mandate that no fishery should be allowed to be active unless it had clear and demonstrable credentials and that it was sustainable. Now, they are incredibly effective in that process, to the point where today sustainability is assumed across the existing fisheries, and managers are now focusing on the concept of system resilience. On the Great Barrier Reef, that's interpreted as reef resilience. That is the golden child of management. That's what we're aiming to conserve. Now, this is an incredibly complex issue, and it has to deal with, accepting the sum of many parts, everything from runoff, coastal development, you name it, it's sort of rolled into this. So it's a very difficult thing to take on. As a result, there's been a key integration of social sciences into the management. As we as an industry were looking around to try and see how can we fit into protecting reef resilience, what are the things that we can do, we stumbled across this fairly complicated model, and don't worry, I'm not going to try and step you through it all. This model was developed by the Tasmanian rock lobster fisheries, and we found that as we drilled down into it, it sort of started to provide us with a little bit of a roadmap of things that we could aim to achieve in order to facilitate that system resilience. So these are some of the things that we were determined to acquire from supply chain analysis and get some baseline data on the fishery and so on. I won't go through each one of those. But basically this was the first deliverable that we got out of that roadmap, and this was our climate change vulnerability assessment. And this was a 150-page document and an $80,000 investment. And so it looked at a broad suite of things from the dynamics of industry, climate change implications, policy and cost implications, management, exposure, a whole gambit of things. And this was a really big step for us. And then we used this plan to then form the basis for the revision of our stewardship action plan. That was the baseline data, and now we were coming back full circle to look at our stewardship action plan and put the things that we had learnt through that process into action. So this has a really key focus on mitigating fishery risk. It's got a massive focus on the coral collection strategies because that forms a significant component in the fishery, and it's obviously of vast global interest. And we did this with full industry engagement with a number of workshops up and down the coastline, industry participating, managers participating in it. And this really helped to galvanise a number of strategic partnerships with our managers. The plan aligns identified risk with industry action. So these two documents to the side of our action plan are agency documents, and it aligns industry and agency responses. So we're all operating together in the same direction. And we're documenting what we will do and how we will do it so there's no confusion. It's also got a significant component that has detailed standards to mitigate risk to fish and coral species that have been identified through those ecological risk assessments. This includes size limits on certain species and no take areas in others. And we've also tackled species that have been prioritised by CITES, and a lot of you would be well aware of the list that US Fish and Wildlife put out with 66 species of corals proposed to be protected. We tackled any of those species that were detailed on that. Now, taking a step away from the great aspects that we've done pertaining management in Australia and coming back to this discussion that we've sort of had through Laura's talk and also through the talks before that. You know, intensive management comes at a price. It's clear that if you jump through all these hoops and you are doing all these amazing things, that there is a cost associated with that. And it's something that I often roll around in my mind is, you know, is the marketplace genuinely interested in paying for that level of management? And unfortunately, I find myself coming to the conclusion that 9 times out of 10, no, the market isn't prepared to pay for that. And that's a very sad reality and something that we need to work to try and change. There is a clear disconnect between community expectation for these high levels of management and the preparedness of market to pay. So consumers have to decide whether they're going to get on board and be prepared to pay more, I think, for sustainably collected animals. And as ACRIS and as curators, directors of facilities displaying these animals, you know, we all need to ask the hard questions about where the fish are coming from and what kind of management is surrounding the fishery that is supplying these animals. And so ultimately, industries going the extra step, you know, doing these amazing things, they have to be supported. Otherwise, it's going to be exactly like the Philippines model when Mac went in there. They tried to get the guys collecting fish with nets. The fishermen did it. They went through that process, but at the end of the day, there was no additional funds there to reward them for going to that effort, and they were better off financially to continue using cyanide. We don't want to see those sorts of things. We need to support these fisheries. And certainly, I'm not suggesting that the Queensland fishery is the only one out there that is doing amazing things. It's just one of those fisheries. So when you go out there and you ask the questions, you'll find that there's other really good things happening out there. So ultimately, in conclusion, the conservation dividend of displaying these animals, you can only really genuinely derive that if those organisms have been collected sustainably. Finally, I'd just like to say I'm very proud to be a member of the Queensland fishery that is providing a sustainable and a robust solution for public aquaria around the world. And, we're doing that through the collaborative integration of management, and we are certainly determined to continue to contribute to reef resilience and the protection thereof. Special thanks to my good friend Ryan Donnelly, who was the architect of the first Stewardship Action Plan, an amazing character, and had great pleasure in working with him over a number of years. And finally, in conclusion, I like to traditionally finish off with some pictures of my children, because these little characters give me the inspiration and the impetus to continue on down this path, no matter how difficult it may be, and also to continue the legacy that my grandfather, who ran public aquariums, and my father have passed on. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have time for 2 questions. Will Laura please join us? Yes, 2 questions. Thank you.
Me too.
Well, I have 1 question. What do you estimate the cost of such animals in comparison to animals cooked the usual way, we say?
Look, that's a very difficult question, because in Australia, not only do we have very intensive management operations, and to give you a small snippet of that, we are logging our fish down to a GPS coordinate. Our corals are logged to a GPS coordinate. We have to notify the government prior to coming into port to tell them where we will be landing, how much volume of product is on our boat, with the expectation that they may be there to verify that. So these are things that aren't on display anywhere else, coupled with the fact that we've got some of the highest wage costs in the world. It's $19.76 an hour is the very basic rate of pay in Australia. So it's an expensive environment to operate. But I think realistically you'd have to expect anywhere up to 4 times as a multiplier between a cyanide caught fish and a hand caught fish, and that simply comes down to the fact that when you're using cyanide and spraying it through corals, you can collect large quantities of fish in a relatively short period of time, as opposed to hand collection that's very targeted and catching one fish at a time.
Well, I guess another great way of kind of demonstrating the sustainability model for the cost of the fish might boil down to just how our divers are paid. Our divers don't actually get paid for the fish they collect. They only get paid once the fish have been collected, housed successfully at our facilities, shipped, and arriving alive at the other end. If an animal has a mortality within that chain of supply, they don't receive pay for that animal. So that's one way that we're ensuring that we're not only collecting for purpose, but also every person along the way is caring for those animals in the best possible way they can. We want our divers to be, we want them to survive and keep working with us. Most of our divers have been with us well over 10 or 15 years. I'm not suggesting that that's the way you could succeed in the Philippines or in Indonesia or the smaller villages. There's got to be a different payment scheme, but it will add cost and value to the animals.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah? EUAC. Denmark. Yeah? Right? You say hello? Okay, say hello. Right. Okay, this was Mick Jagger. He says, I've got something here. He left for Mr. Pete McLean. Would you please come, please? He says it's got your name on it. Thank you for your help.
Thank you all for being here. Without you, this would be nothing. So, thank you.
May I remind you that the T-shirts are available over there. Special bargain today, you buy one and you can get another one if you pay for. Thank you.